When a first-class passenger refused to give up a seat that wasn't his, he thought he was winning the argument. Until security showed up, and the truth about who he was talking to hit him like a brick. The moment she stepped into the terminal at Dallas Love Field Airport, heads turned, not because she was a celebrity or wearing something loud, but because Simone Harrington carried herself like someone who belonged anywhere she set foot. The deep navy pantsuit, the perfectly pressed blouse, the watch that caught the light just enough without screaming for attention, all of it whispered authority. But it was her eyes, sharp and deliberate, that told the real story. Simone wasn't just any passenger checking in for Flight 482 to Boston. She was the CEO of Skylux Airlines, the company whose planes crisscrossed the globe every day under her leadership. And yet here she was, walking toward a standard departure gate like everyone else, no entourage, no private jet waiting on a side runway. Most people in her position would have flown privately, especially with an important shareholders' meeting the next morning. But Simone believed in staying connected to the passenger experience. Sitting in one of her own first-class seats gave her more insight than any quarterly report ever could. Her assistant, Jordan Finch, had tried to talk her out of it earlier that morning. "It's not about the cost," Jordan had said while holding her coffee. "It's about time. You could be working right up until takeoff if we just used the jet." Simone had only smiled. "Sometimes you learn more by listening than talking, Jordan. Besides, I want to see how this Boston crew operates. You can't manage from the top floor forever." Now, walking through the terminal, she took in the scene. Families huddled near outlets charging devices. Business travelers hunched over laptops. A group of college students laughing around a pile of overstuffed carry-ons. She liked this view, the raw, unfiltered version of her customers' lives. At the Skylux gate, the boarding sign flashed. "First class. Now boarding." The gate agent, Trina Miles, instantly recognized her, though Simone gave a subtle shake of her head that meant, "Not today. Treat me like anyone else." The boarding process felt smooth. The smell of brewed coffee drifted from the galley as she stepped onto the jet bridge. A flight attendant in her late 20s, Maya Chen, welcomed her aboard. "Good morning, Ms. Harrington, right?" Maya's eyes flicked in recognition before she caught herself. Simone smiled. "Good morning, Maya. Just another passenger today." As she made her way down the aisle toward 2A, she let her fingertips graze the top of the seat backs, a small habit she'd picked up over the years, grounding herself in the space. She glanced at the crisp leather, the alignment of the seatbelts, the folded blankets. It was second nature to inspect details without making it obvious. Then she reached her row and stopped. A man in a charcoal grey blazer sat comfortably in 2A, one leg crossed over the other, scrolling through his phone like he had been there for hours. His roller bag was in the overhead bin above her seat, and his briefcase rested on the floor. Simone glanced at her boarding pass. No mistake. 2A was hers. "Excuse me," she said, her voice polite but clear. "I believe you're in my seat." The man didn't look up at first. He gave a quick, dismissive chuckle. "Yeah, I don't think so. I've been sitting here since boarding started." Simone kept her tone even. "I understand, but this is 2A, and that's the seat on my ticket." This time, he looked at her. A slow, assessing glance that ended in a smirk. "You sure you're in the right section? Maybe you're back there," he said, jerking his head toward the rows of economy. The remark landed like a slap, though she didn't flinch. Years in corporate boardrooms had taught her how to keep a mask in place. "I'm certain I'm in the right section," she replied. "I'd appreciate it if you'd check your ticket." A few passengers nearby had stopped pretending to read or scroll, eyes and ears tuned in, the way people do when tension sparks in a confined space. Maya, the flight attendant, approached, sensing something was wrong. "Is everything all right here?" she asked. Before Simone could answer, the man leaned back in the seat like he was planting a flag. "I'm fine. Just seems we've got a little confusion about seating. I'm not moving." Simone's heartbeat was steady, but her mind sharpened. She could have revealed who she was in that instant, the CEO whose name was on his boarding pass receipt, but she didn't. Not yet. Instead, she measured him, deciding on her next move. But she knew one thing. This wasn't going to be resolved with a smile and a shrug. And what she decided to do next would change the entire flight. Maya shifted her weight, glancing from Simone to the man in 2A. There was no mistaking the undercurrent, the kind that made the air feel tighter, heavier. She kept her voice professional, but there was a hint of steel in it. "Sir, may I please see your boarding pass?" The man, later Simone would learn his name was Gregory Harkins, sighed dramatically, fishing in the inner pocket of his blazer. "Fine, here, but you're wasting both our time." He handed over the small slip of paper. Maya glanced down, then back at him. "Mr. Harkins, you're in 3C, not 2A. Gregory took the ticket back, looked at it like it had just betrayed him, and then shrugged. "I like this one better. Legroom's better here." "I'm not moving." Simone kept her hands folded loosely in front of her. She'd seen people like this in meetings, the type who believed rules bent around them like heat-warping glass. She decided to keep her voice even, but direct. "Sir, you're in my assigned seat. Please move to yours so the boarding process can continue." Gregory's gaze sharpened, his mouth curling into a thin smile. "You're really going to make a scene over a seat? You've got plenty of space back there." The choice of words wasn't lost on anyone. Back there. It carried a weight, an implication that stretched beyond the cabin walls. A woman 2 rows back stopped pretending to adjust her neck pillow and started filming discreetly with her phone angled low. Maya spoke again, this time firmer. "Mr. Harkins, we need you to move to your assigned seat now." He leaned back, his voice rising slightly. "What's the big deal? The plane hasn't even pushed back yet. Besides, I paid good money for this ticket. More than some people here, I'm sure." Simone's expression didn't change, but inside, a slow burn had started. She wasn't angry in the reckless way that made people say things they'd regret. She was angry in the deliberate way, the kind that calculated. "You're holding up the flight," she said, her tone clipped. "And you're assuming a lot about people you don't know." Gregory chuckled without humor. "I know enough to tell when someone's trying to get above their station." That drew an audible, "Wow!" from a man in 1D. He shook his head and muttered to his seatmate, "This is unbelievable." Maya's radio crackled softly, the purser checking in from the galley. She gave a short reply and then straightened. "Mr. Harkins, if you refuse to move, I'll have to involve the captain." He smirked again, looking her up and down. "Go ahead. Let's see how far you want to take this." Simone could feel the eyes of half the cabin on her, some supportive, some curious, some impatient. She weighed the situation. She could escalate now, or let Gregory continue to dig himself deeper. She decided on the latter. "Maya," Simone said softly, "I'll speak with the captain." Gregory raised an eyebrow, clearly amused. "Oh, so now you're calling in reinforcements?" "Figures." Simone ignored him and began walking toward the front. The murmurs followed her like a wave. She could hear snatches of conversation. "She's handling it so calmly. That guy's out of line. I wonder if she's somebody important." At the cockpit door, she leaned in and spoke to the captain in a low voice. His brows rose slightly, and he nodded without hesitation. A brief exchange with the lead flight attendant followed, and within moments, the energy in the cabin shifted. Back at row 2, Gregory looked puzzled as Maya stood near him, hands clasped professionally. "Mr. Harkins," she said, "I need you to gather your belongings. Security will meet you at the door." He let out a short, incredulous laugh. "Security? For sitting in a seat?" "For refusing to follow crew instructions," Maya replied evenly. The aisle behind them was now crowded with passengers still boarding. People craned their necks for a better view. Gregory's voice got louder. "This is ridiculous. I'm not going anywhere until—" But that's when 2 uniformed airport security officers stepped into the cabin, moving with quiet authority. Gregory's bravado flickered for the first time. "Wait, you're serious?" he said, looking between them. One officer gestured to the overhead bin. "Sir, your bag, please." Gregory muttered under his breath, but stood, snatching his briefcase from the floor. As he stepped into the aisle, he glanced at Simone. "Hope you're happy?" She met his gaze calmly. "I'm satisfied that the rules apply to everyone." But what Gregory didn't yet realize was that this was only the beginning. and the fallout from those few stubborn minutes would reach far beyond the cabin walls. Gregory's removal from the cabin had left a low buzz of conversation hanging in the air. Some passengers were whispering to each other, others staring openly at Simone, as if trying to figure out exactly who she was. The security officers walked him up the jet bridge, their presence a silent statement that the incident wasn't going to be brushed aside. Maya returned to Simone, gesturing toward the now empty 2A. "You can sit down now, Ms. Harrington." Simone gave a small nod, but instead of sitting immediately, she placed her carry-on in the overhead bin and leaned slightly toward Maya. "I appreciate how you handled that. Calm and by the book." Maya's lips curved into a grateful smile. "We get difficult passengers sometimes, but that was different." Simone didn't comment yet. She wanted the focus to stay on getting the flight ready, not on her personal thoughts about Gregory's remarks. But the weight of what he'd said was still pressing against the back of her mind. It wasn't just a seat he was trying to take. It was the assumption behind it, the way he thought he could get away with dismissing her presence entirely. As the final passengers boarded, a man across the aisle in 2B leaned over slightly. "I just want to say, you handled yourself with a lot of class back there. Most people would have lost their temper." Simone met his eyes. "Sometimes anger gives the other person exactly what they're looking for. I'd rather give them nothing." The man chuckled softly. "Well, you gave him something, all right. A one-way ticket back to the terminal." They both let the moment pass with a faint smile. But the reprieve didn't last long. The purser, Elaine Porter, came down from the galley with a subtle urgency in her step. "Miss Harrington, the captain would like a word before we push back." Simone rose and followed Elaine toward the cockpit again. The captain, a tall man with a salt and pepper beard named Frank Delaney, waited just outside the door. "Ma'am," he said in a low voice, "I understand you didn't identify yourself during that seating dispute." "That's correct," Simone replied. "I wanted to see how my crew would handle it without intervention." Frank nodded once. "They did well, but there's a matter we need to address. Mr. Harkins is claiming discrimination against him. He says the crew targeted him unfairly." Simone's brows lifted just slightly, but she kept her voice even. "He refused a direct instruction from the crew. That's all that matters here." Frank sighed. "I agree, but with him already talking to airport supervisors, I need to know how you want to proceed. We can still depart on time, but the final call is yours." This was the pivot point, the moment to decide whether to treat this as a minor disturbance or something bigger, and Simone knew that if she let it pass quietly, the wrong lesson would be learned. "We're not leaving yet," she said firmly. "If a passenger thinks they can ignore crew authority and demean another traveler without consequence, they're not flying on my airline today, and we're going to document everything properly before we move an inch." Frank gave her a long, measuring look. "Understood." When Simone returned to her seat, Elaine followed with an announcement over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, we appreciate your patience. We're addressing an onboard matter and will be departing shortly. Thank you for your understanding." That announcement only fueled more whispers. A teenager in row 4 had his phone out, clearly typing rapidly into a social media post. An older woman in 1C leaned over toward Simone. "Honey, I don't know who you are, but you sure know how to keep your cool." Simone smiled faintly. "Sometimes it's better to let people underestimate you. They reveal themselves faster that way." Maya returned with a small folder of papers. The incident report that needed Simone's signature as a witness. She flipped it open, and Simone noticed Gregory's scribbled statement already in place, full of exaggerated claims about being harassed and embarrassed in front of other passengers. She signed her own statement calmly, noting the sequence of events in precise detail. Her penmanship was crisp, deliberate, every word chosen with care. As she handed the folder back, her mind was already on the next step. This wasn't about ego. It was about precedent. If she allowed Gregory's actions to go unchallenged, it would send the wrong message not just to passengers, but to her crew. Her phone buzzed, a message from Jordan, her assistant. "Just saw a clip online. It's already getting traction. Want me to prepare a statement?" She typed back, "Not yet. I'm still on the plane. This isn't over." But the moment she hit send, she knew the real turbulence wouldn't come from the flight. It would come from the world watching outside. The cabin felt different now, not louder, but sharper, like everyone was leaning in without moving from their seats. Conversations were being traded in low voices, glances darted toward Simone every few seconds, and phones sat half hidden in hands, recording without shame. Elaine, the purser, made her way down the aisle again, stopping briefly at Simone's row. "Miss Harrington, the airport's customer service supervisor is boarding to collect more details. They'll come to you directly." Simone nodded. "That's fine. I'll speak with them here." A few minutes later, a woman in her early 40s with a badge reading Patricia Long stepped onto the plane. She had the kind of presence that made you think she'd handled more than her fair share of crises. Her tone was polite but brisk. "Miss Harrington, I understand you were involved in a seating dispute with a passenger who's now been removed." "Correct," Simone replied. Patricia pulled a small notepad from her blazer pocket. "I'd like to hear your account. The removed passenger alleges he was treated unfairly and that you instigated the removal." Simone kept her voice calm. "I approached my assigned seat, found him occupying it, and requested that he move. He refused multiple times, despite being shown his correct seat on the boarding pass by the crew. He also made derogatory remarks toward me. The crew followed procedure. His removal was based on refusal to comply with crew instructions." Patricia jotted down a few lines. "Were any of his remarks threatening in nature?" Simone's eyes narrowed just slightly. Not threatening in the physical sense, but unacceptable in tone and implication. "If your question is whether I felt physically unsafe, no. But he was disrespecting both the rules and the authority of my crew. That's not negotiable." Patricia nodded once, making another note. "Understood. I'll be speaking with the captain next. We're working to clear this so your flight can depart." As Patricia moved toward the cockpit, Simone noticed the man across the aisle, the same one who'd complimented her composure earlier, lean slightly forward. "Seems like they're taking this seriously," he murmured. "They should," Simone said. "It's not just about the seat. It's about what happens when you think the rules don't apply to you." Meanwhile, in the galley, Maya was conferring quietly with Elaine. Their voices were low, but Simone caught a few phrases. "Videos online already, and passengers tagging the airline." It confirmed what she suspected. This wasn't going to stay a contained incident. As if on cue, her phone buzzed again. Another message from Jordan. "Now trending on Twitter under #SkyLuxFlight482. One clip has 60K views already. He's calling it reverse discrimination." Simone took a slow breath. She knew how quickly public narratives could be shaped, and misshaped, especially when only one side was loud enough at the start. Patricia returned, her expression unchanged, but her tone more measured. "We've decided to log this as a formal incident. The passenger has been escorted back to the terminal for questioning by airport police. We're cleared to depart once final paperwork is signed." Simone glanced toward the cockpit, then back at Patricia. "Make sure the report reflects the full scope of events, including the remarks he made and the fact that the crew acted entirely within policy." Patricia gave a small nod before stepping off the aircraft. But even as the immediate logistics were being wrapped up, the tension inside the cabin wasn't dissipating. In row 5, a younger man spoke just loudly enough for others to hear. "Grounding the flight for one guy? Overkill." A woman across the aisle shot back without hesitation. "It's not overkill if someone refuses crew instructions. That's how safety works." The back and forth made its way forward, snippets of debate rising and falling until Elaine had to make another announcement, reminding passengers to remain seated. Simone sat back in 2A now, finally settled in the seat that had been hers all along. But the position didn't feel like a victory. Not yet. She'd been in enough corporate battles to know that what happened in this cabin was just the first act. The bigger fight would happen outside, in boardrooms, news segments, and comment threads. Maya stopped by once more, leaning down slightly. "We're about ready to close the door. I just wanted to say thank you. Most passengers in your position might have lost their temper. You didn't." Simone met her gaze with a faint smile. "When you've been underestimated your whole life, you learn that control is power." Elaine's voice came over the intercom again. "Cabin crew, prepare for departure." The door closed, the engines began to spool, and the plane pushed back from the gate. But even as the runway drew closer, Simone could feel the weight of something still hanging in the air. Because while Gregory was no longer on board, his voice was already echoing across the internet, and it wouldn't be long before the world started asking questions. The plane rolled toward the runway, but Simone's focus wasn't on the hum of the engines or the flight attendants completing final checks. She was already thinking 3 steps ahead. Gregory was off the plane, but his narrative had left the building. And the internet doesn't care about sequence or nuance. It cares about speed, outrage, and whoever speaks first. Elaine passed by for a last check before takeoff, but Simone stopped her briefly. When we land in Boston, I'd like a full debrief from you and Maya about the timeline. Every word, every action. Details matter here. Elaine nodded, instantly understanding the gravity in Simone's voice. I'll have it ready. The seatbelt sign dinged off after takeoff, and for the first time since boarding, Simone allowed herself to lean back slightly. But not for long. She pulled her phone from her bag, scanning the notifications. Jordan had sent 3 more messages. The video's on TikTok now, over 200K views. Local news outlets in Dallas are reaching out for comment. Some are asking if you were the passenger in the video. Simone typed back quickly. Tell them we're reviewing the incident and will comment at the appropriate time. No confirmation, no denial yet. The passenger in 2B, who'd been watching her subtly, leaned over again. So I'm guessing this isn't your first time handling situations. She gave him a wry look. Let's just say my job comes with a few challenges, and sometimes they show up where you least expect them. He tilted his head. You're not going to tell me what you do, are you? Not yet, she said, a faint glint in her eyes. From 2 rows behind, the teenager who'd been typing earlier piped up. Hey, just so you know, you're on TikTok. People are saying you got that guy kicked off for no reason. Simone turned in her seat to meet his gaze directly. Then maybe they should watch the whole video. Or better yet, be here in person to see what happened. The boy blinked, then shrugged, muttering something about haters online. But it was confirmation. The narrative was already splintering. Maya came down the aisle offering drinks. When she reached Simone, she lowered her voice. You're trending under 3 different hashtags. People are arguing in the comments, some siding with you, some saying you abused your influence. Simone took a sip of water before responding. The truth doesn't need to shout, Maya. It just needs to be ready when the moment comes. But Maya still looked uneasy. I've seen things go viral before. Sometimes facts don't catch up fast enough. Simone gave her a reassuring look. That's why we'll make sure the facts have a megaphone when they do. The rest of the flight passed in tense pockets, a mix of routine service and an undercurrent of curiosity from fellow passengers. Some approached Simone quietly to express support. Others kept their distance but stole glances, as if trying to piece together their own conclusions. An hour before landing, Elaine returned with a slim folder. Inside were typed notes from both her and Maya detailing the interaction. Times, exact quotes, and passenger reactions. Simone read every line, underlining phrases Gregory had used, the ones that dripped with condescension, the ones that turned an ordinary seating dispute into a display of something uglier. She closed the folder. This is exactly what we'll need, she said quietly. Elaine hesitated, then asked, If you don't mind me asking, what happens next? Simone looked out the small oval window at the clouds streaking past. Next, I make sure this isn't remembered as just another viral clip. It has to mean something. For the crew, for the company, for every passenger who thinks rules are optional. Elaine seemed to absorb that, then returned to her duties. Simone rested her hands in her lap, but her mind was already arranging the pieces. The video, the incident report, the public statement. The plane began its descent into Boston, the city skyline emerging beneath scattered clouds. But while most passengers were focused on the landing, Simone's attention was locked on the press inquiries waiting for her. She could picture the microphones, the loaded questions, the comments section ready to pounce. And she knew exactly how she was going to handle it, not with outrage, but with the same calm authority that had made her one of the most respected CEOs in the industry. The landing in Boston was smooth, but the moment the aircraft's wheels touched the runway, Simone felt the shift. Her phone vibrated with a flurry of new alerts before the plane even reached the gate. By the time the seatbelt sign turned off, the notifications were stacked so high she had to scroll for several seconds just to reach the top. Jordan had left her a voice message, his tone somewhere between urgency and barely contained frustration. "Simone, the clip is everywhere now. Gregory's already given an interview outside Dallas Love Field. He's painting this as him being targeted and claims you were on a power trip. CNN and a few business networks are calling to ask if you were the passenger. We need a plan before this spins further." She closed her eyes briefly, taking in a slow breath before standing. The aisle was already jammed with passengers retrieving bags from the overhead bins. Some gave her encouraging nods, others just studied her in quiet curiosity. Elaine appeared beside her. "Airport security will meet us at the gate. They want to walk you to a private room before you head to baggage claim." Simone's expression stayed neutral. "Fine. Let's move quickly. I don't want a spectacle in the terminal." The moment the aircraft door opened, she could see them. 2 uniformed security officers and a man in a suit she recognized as Thomas Vale, the regional operations director for Skylux. He gave her a look that said, "This just got bigger than both of us." As they walked down the jet bridge, Thomas kept his voice low. "Gregory's threatening to file a complaint with the FAA. He's also claiming you had him removed because you didn't like his politics." Simone's jaw tightened slightly, though her tone remained measured. "That's a fiction. We have witnesses, documented instructions from crew, and an official incident report. I'll respond when I have all the facts aligned." In the small conference room off the arrivals hall, Jordan was already waiting, laptop open. On the screen were 3 split windows, one showing the original video from a passenger's phone, another showing Gregory's post-flight interview, and a third tracking social media engagement. Jordan wasted no time. "The problem is he's controlling the story. His interview's been clipped and reposted hundreds of times. People are sharing it with captions like, 'CEO throws man off plane over seat.'" Simone pulled out the incident report and placed it on the table. "Then we stop letting him tell it. We tell the truth, and we do it clearly enough that the noise can't drown it out." Thomas crossed his arms. "We need to consider the optics. Once the press learns you were the passenger, they'll spin it as a power move unless we're ahead of it." "Exactly," Simone said. "That's why I'm going to make a public statement before end of day. But it's not going to be defensive. It's going to be about standards, policy, and the responsibility we have to protect crew authority." Jordan hesitated. "You sure you want to go that route? It could get more personal." Simone looked directly at him. "It already is personal, not because of who I am, but because of what I represent in that cabin. If a passenger can ignore crew orders without consequence, that erodes the safety foundation of the entire operation. This is bigger than me." They worked quickly, Jordan drafting potential talking points while Thomas arranged for the company's legal team to review the final statement. But before they could finalize it, Simone's phone buzzed again. An unknown number. She almost ignored it, but something told her to answer. "Miss Harrington?" The voice on the other end was calm, deliberate. "This is Detective Angela Kerr from the airport police. We have Mr. Harkins in a holding area for questioning. I thought you should know. He's changed his story twice already." "Changed it how?" Simone asked. "First he claimed it was about seating. Then he said you made a personal comment to him, which no witnesses have confirmed. Now he's saying the crew ganged up on him." Simone's voice stayed steady. "Document all of it. If he's altering his account, that's important. We'll need every version on record." Detective Kerr agreed and promised to forward a summary report. Simone ended the call, turning back to the table. "He's contradicting himself. That tells me he's not thinking about the truth. He's thinking about leverage." Jordan tapped the laptop screen showing Gregory's interview. "Then maybe it's time we take that away from him. Because the longer Gregory controlled the narrative, the more damage could be done. And Simone wasn't about to let him decide how her airline's values were defined." The private conference room felt insulated from the chaos outside, but Simone knew the terminal was alive with chatter. Passengers from Flight 482 were already dispersing into the baggage claim area, talking to anyone who would listen. Every phone in their hands was a potential broadcast tower, sending fragments of the incident into the world. Thomas had stepped out to coordinate with the corporate communications team, leaving Simone and Jordan to review a growing compilation of social media clips. Each was only a few seconds long, and each told a slightly different version of events. In one, Gregory's smug tone was crystal clear. In another, you could only hear him insist, "I'm not moving," before security appeared. The most widely shared clip cut off right after that, leaving Simone's calm expression frozen in the frame. Jordan scrolled through the comments. Some are cheering you on, saying it's about time someone stood up to entitled passengers. Others are calling it an abuse of power. And a few, well, they're just looking for something to be angry about. Simone rested her elbows on the table, fingers laced together. The internet rewards speed, not accuracy. But that also means people will latch onto the most vivid version they hear first. While Jordan kept scrolling, the door opened. Elaine and Maya entered, each carrying their own bags. Their uniforms were still crisp, but their faces carried the weight of a long day. Elaine spoke first. "We've been hearing from passengers all afternoon. Some came up just to say thank you. One man told me it was the first time he'd seen a crew hold the line on seating policy without caving." Maya added, "But not all of them agree. There's a couple in 4A and 4B who thought we overreacted. They said it was just a seat, and we shouldn't have delayed takeoff." Simone listened without interruption. "And how did you respond?" Maya hesitated before answering. "I told them we follow procedure for a reason, that it's not about the seat, it's about listening to crew instructions for everyone's safety." "Good," Simone said. "That's exactly right. We can't train for every type of disrespect, but we can train for the response." Elaine shifted her weight slightly, lowering her voice. "I'll be honest, Ms. Harrington. I've been in this industry long enough to see how fast public opinion can turn. Once it becomes a story about personalities instead of policies, it's harder to win." Simone leaned back, considering that. "Then we make sure the focus stays on what happened and why it matters. No insults, no theatrics, just the truth." From her phone, a notification chimed. A text from Thomas. "Local TV crew in the terminal. Some passengers are already talking to them. One woman mentioned hearing him say, 'People like you don't belong up here. She's willing to go on record.'" Simone read the text aloud, and the room went still. Maya's jaw tightened. "I was right there. I heard it too." "So did I," Elaine confirmed. "It was one of those comments you can't mistake." Jordan looked between them. "If passengers confirm that publicly, it changes the story completely. It's no longer about a seat, it's about behavior." Simone met his eyes. "Exactly. And once that part of the truth is visible, people will understand why we acted as we did." But the conversation in the room was just one small pocket of the wider reaction. In the terminal, clusters of passengers were still gathered near the Skylux customer service desk, swapping versions of the story. Some told reporters it was inspiring to see a woman stand her ground. Others complained about the delay and said the removal was unnecessary. One older man in a Red Sox cap summed up the divide perfectly to a local reporter. "If you ask me, it's simple. You follow crew instructions or you don't fly. But some people think their ticket makes them the exception." By early evening, national outlets had picked up the footage. The headlines varied. Some framed it as a confrontation over airline policy, others as a viral clash between passenger and CEO. The words "racist remark" began appearing in a few, citing passengers who'd been willing to go on record. In the conference room, Jordan closed his laptop slowly. "You know, if this keeps building, we could see corporate sponsors weighing in. Some will like the way you handled it, some might get skittish." Simone didn't flinch. Leadership isn't about pleasing everyone. It's about doing what's right when it's easier to stay quiet. But she also knew that the next step, speaking out publicly, would be the real test. The moment she opened her mouth, the weight of her words would either steady the narrative or send it spinning in a whole new direction. By the time Simone left the conference room, the terminal had thinned out, but her phone told a different story. One where the incident on Flight 482 was no longer just a travel disruption. It had become content, dissected and reshaped by thousands of strangers. The first thing she saw when she refreshed her feed was a split-screen post. On the left, the blurry footage of Gregory lounging in 2A, smirking. On the right, a close-up of his post-flight interview. The caption read, "Entitled CEO throws paying customer off flight. Was it justified?" The comments section was a war zone. Jordan walked beside her toward the car service pickup area, laptop bag slung over his shoulder. You're everywhere now. Twitter, Facebook, TikTok. One clip has been stitched into 3 different influencer reaction videos, each with their own take. Simone glanced at him. What's the balance? Support versus criticism? Hard to say. The loudest critics are framing it as you using your position to punish someone. The supporters are hammering the point about following crew instructions. But, he hesitated. The political angle is already creeping in. That last part didn't surprise her. Once online debates turned political, they rarely stayed about the facts. When they reached the waiting car, Thomas was already inside, phone pressed to his ear. He motioned for Simone to get in, wrapping up his call quickly. We've got 2 national outlets asking for a live interview tonight. If you decline, they'll still run with the story, just without your voice in it. Simone settled into the seat. We'll speak, but on our terms. Controlled setting, our own recording. Full context. Jordan opened his laptop as the car pulled away from the terminal, tapping quickly. Here's what we're looking at online. #SkyLux standards is trending thanks to supporters. The opposition is using #Seatgate. Some of the supportive posts are from verified accounts, frequent travelers, a few aviation bloggers. The critics. He turned the screen toward her. Well, you know how that goes. She scanned the feed. One tweet stood out. A passenger from 1D who'd clearly had the best vantage point in the cabin. I watched the whole thing. She gave him multiple chances to move before calling security. The guy thought he was above the rules. End of story. Simone pointed to it. Reach out to him. Ask if he'd be willing to confirm that publicly in a longer statement. First-hand accounts are stronger than anything corporate can say. Jordan nodded, already drafting the message. Back in the digital world, the incident was morphing into dozens of smaller narratives. A travel podcast host posted a clip titled, Why This Airline CEO May Have Just Set a New Standard. A political commentator spun it as, Corporate elitism meets air travel. A flight attendant from another airline stitched the viral clip with her own take, praising SkyLux for backing its crew. Thomas broke the scrolling silence. The legal team says we can release a statement tonight, but they want it clean. No direct mention of Gregory's name or his specific remarks. They want to stick to policy. Simone shook her head. We can't sanitize it so much that it feels hollow. We won't attack him, but we will address what happened. If we don't speak to the truth, the speculation will own the space. Jordan typed as she spoke, the words forming on the screen. SkyLux Airlines maintains a zero-tolerance policy for passengers who refuse crew instructions or engage in behavior that undermines safety and respect on board. Our crews are trained to enforce these standards consistently, regardless of who is involved. On Flight 482, those standards were upheld. We will always support our crews in maintaining the safety, dignity, and order that every passenger deserves. Simone read it over. That's a start. Add one line. Leadership means applying the same rules to ourselves that we expect of others. Jordan added it without hesitation. As the car wound through the city streets toward the SkyLux Boston offices, Simone's phone lit up again. A passenger from 3D, someone she hadn't spoken to, had posted their own short video explaining what they saw. It included Gregory's exact words. People like you don't belong up here. The clip was already gaining traction, racking up thousands of likes and retweets. Thomas exhaled sharply. That changes everything. Once that line circulates, the conversation shifts. Simone's gaze stayed steady on the phone. Then it's time for the truth to speak louder than the noise. Because social media had already built its stage, now it was her turn to step onto it before someone else claimed her lines. The SkyLux Boston headquarters was quiet by the time Simone arrived, but the building's glass facade reflected the city lights like a camera flash frozen in place. Inside, the top-floor conference room had been prepared for her. A small podium, a backdrop with the SkyLux logo, and a single row of cameras manned by the company's media team. No outside press had been allowed in. If anyone was going to release this statement, it would be on SkyLux's terms. Jordan was already there, pacing lightly, his tablet in hand. We've got everything set for a live stream to our official channels. The transcript will be released immediately after. Once it's out everywhere. Simone stepped up to the podium and glanced over the final draft he'd prepared. She made 2 small changes, shifting a word here, tightening a phrase there, before looking up at the room. "I'm not reading this," she said simply. Jordan blinked. "Not reading it, not word for word. I'll use it as a frame, but I need to speak like I mean it, not like I'm reciting it." She signaled for the cameras to start. The red light above the lens clicked on, and Simone's voice filled the room. "Good evening. Today an incident occurred on Skylux Flight 482 from Dallas to Boston. A passenger refused to move from an assigned seat after multiple polite requests and a direct instruction from our crew. This passenger also made remarks toward another traveler that were disrespectful and unacceptable on any flight, on any airline. Our crews are trained to de-escalate, to communicate clearly, and to enforce policies consistently, no matter who is involved. On Flight 482, they did exactly that. I am proud of how our team handled themselves in the face of refusal and disruption. Leadership means applying the same rules to ourselves that we expect of others. No passenger, no matter their background or their status, is above following instructions that keep flights safe, orderly, and respectful for all. That's the standard at Skylux, and it will not change." She let the silence sit for a moment before continuing, her tone softer but still deliberate. "This is not about seats. It's about respect, for crew, for passengers, for the shared space we all occupy when we fly. Every ticket is a promise, that you'll be treated fairly and that you'll treat others the same way. When that promise is broken, we address it. That's our responsibility." She stepped back from the podium. The live stream ended. Jordan exhaled like he'd been holding his breath the entire time. "You didn't just answer them, you set the frame. That's what they'll quote." The comms team immediately began pushing the clip across Skylux's official channels. Within minutes, the comments began flooding in. Many praised the clarity and firmness of her words. Some still accused her of overreach, but the tone was shifting. The viral clip of Gregory's "people like you" remark, paired with Simone's statement, was now dominating the conversation. Thomas, who had been monitoring the feeds from his phone, looked up. "Major news outlets are picking it up as breaking. They're leading with the part about respect, not the power trip angle anymore." Simone sat at the edge of the conference table, her posture relaxed but her eyes alert. "This isn't about winning the internet. It's about making sure the crew knows they weren't just left out there to take the heat. If they can trust leadership to stand with them, they'll hold the line every time." Jordan scrolled through live reactions. Here's one from a passenger advocacy group. "Skylux's CEO just set an example for every airline executive. If you can't follow crew instructions, you don't fly." That's gold. Simone allowed herself a small smile. "Good. Let's make sure the union sees that one." In the hours that followed, the statement was replayed on evening broadcasts and clipped into short segments online. Commentators debated it, travelers shared their own stories of difficult passengers, and a few industry experts weighed in, calling the incident a textbook case for why airline authority matters. But Simone didn't linger on the praise. She'd been in business long enough to know that public sentiment could be as fleeting as it was loud. Because even as the tide began turning in her favor, she understood the story wasn't over. It was just settling into the part where people decided what they'd take from it, and whether it would be remembered as a headline or a lesson. By the following morning, the story had traveled further than Simone could have anticipated. It wasn't just the travel blogs or airline industry insiders talking anymore. It was morning talk shows, workplace Slack threads, dinner table conversations. People weren't just discussing the incident. They were using it as a lens to talk about bigger issues: entitlement, leadership, and what respect actually looks like in a shared space. Simone sat in her corner office overlooking Boston Harbor, a fresh cup of coffee in hand. The skyline was still waking up, streaks of pink sunlight cutting across the water. She had already reviewed the overnight media monitoring report. The balance had shifted. Support for her decision was outweighing criticism now, thanks in part to passenger testimonies confirming Gregory's words and behavior. Jordan entered quietly, a printed email in his hand. "From Maya," he said. "She wanted to thank you for standing up for the crew. She said it made her feel like the work she does actually matters." Simone read it silently, a faint smile forming at the corners of her mouth. She folded the paper neatly. That's the real win here, Jordan. Not the headlines, not the trending hashtags. It's knowing the people out there in uniform believe they'll be backed when it counts. He took a seat across from her. You know, a lot of execs would have smoothed this over quietly. Let the passenger go, avoided the press. You didn't. You made it a line in the sand. Simone nodded slowly. That's the thing about leadership. If you're only willing to enforce the rules when it's easy, they're not really rules. They're suggestions. And suggestions don't keep people safe at 35,000 feet. There was a pause before Jordan spoke again. Do you think Gregory will let it go now? Simone's gaze shifted to the harbor outside. Maybe, maybe not. But that's his choice. My responsibility was to act in the moment and make it clear what Skylux stands for. If that makes some people uncomfortable, so be it. Discomfort is where change starts. The rest of the day was a blur of follow-up calls, legal reviews, union outreach, and a check-in with the Boston crew who had taken over Flight 482 once it finally departed. Every single one of them expressed gratitude for the backing they'd received. That night, Simone took a quiet moment for herself. No cameras, no boardrooms, just her at the small writing desk in her apartment, jotting thoughts into a leather-bound notebook she'd kept for years. She wrote about the moment Gregory smirked at her in 2A, about the restraint it took not to flash her CEO title immediately, about the way the crew stood their ground without knowing the company's top executive was watching. Her final line on the page read, "Respect is a shared currency. Spend it freely, but never let anyone counterfeit it." The next morning, she sent a short internal memo to all Skylux staff. Every seat on every plane we operate carries the same expectation, that you will be treated with respect, and that you will give respect in return. Authority on board exists to protect everyone, not to favor some. To my crews, you have my trust. To our passengers, you have my promise. The memo was shared widely within hours, not just among employees, but by passengers who'd seen it online. For many, it became the lasting takeaway from the entire saga. And while the viral buzz eventually slowed, the story remained in circulation, retold in aviation training sessions, discussed in industry panels, and remembered by those who'd watched it unfold in real time. For Simone, the lesson was clear. Titles and positions might grant authority, but it's the choices you make when that authority is tested that define your leadership. She hadn't grounded that flight to prove a point to Gregory. She'd grounded it to prove a promise to everyone else. So the next time someone on a Skylux flight thought about ignoring a crew instruction or belittling a fellow passenger, maybe they'd remember Flight 482 and realize that on this airline, respect isn't optional. If you believe in that standard, share it. And if you ever find yourself in a moment where doing the right thing might cost you comfort, time, or even popularity, take it anyway. That's how you make sure the rules, and the respect behind them, actually mean something.